It's so freezing cold. I woke up standing in a vast snow-covered mountain in northeast China. My breath instantly condensed into a white mist in the frigid air. I was dressed in thin clothes with frost on my eyebrows and icicles hanging from my nose. This wasn't a dream. Just yesterday, I was an ace sniper of the Northeast Fierce Tiger Special Warfare Brigade in 2024, but I was accidentally killed in a plane crash during a mission. Now, I have traveled back to the year 1958. My name has changed from Lin Bei to Pong Bei, and I am now a 17-year-old mountain dweller who can barely afford to eat. The original owner of this body froze to death in this icy wilderness. He was a tough guy who risked his life to hunt for his mother and his 4-year-old sister, Pong Chen. His father was an abusive man who brutally beat his mother and forced the family to do all the heavy household chores. The original owner wanted a family separation to save his mother and sister from being beaten or starving to death. His mother even secretly carried rat poison, ready to die together if things failed. Out of respect for the original owner, I resolved to fulfill his wish and take good care of his family. However, the original owner's hunting skills were amateurish. He relied on a crude rabbit snare that was set at the wrong height. I dismantled his broken trap and used my Special Forces survival skills to build a proper functioning running noose trap using the elasticity of a flexible branch. Just as I finished setting the trap, I heard a faint voice calling out to me. I looked up and saw my little sister, Pang Qian, struggling through the deep snow. Her small face was red from the cold. She was holding up a tattered cloth bundle containing food sent by our maternal uncle. She told me our mother didn't want to eat it, so she brought it out to me because I hadn't eaten anything all morning. Holding her in my arms, I felt a deep warmth. I told her to save the food for now, promising that once I caught a rabbit, we would make a big meat stew and eat it together. Hearing this, she clapped her hands in pure joy, excited to taste meat for the very first time. Leading my younger sister with one hand, I braved the biting north wind and searched the hillside for prey. Tracking was a basic survival skill from my past life in the Special Operations TIS. Although my current body was weak and lacked equipment, my instincts were still sharp. After walking for a while, I spotted fresh rabbit droppings at the base of a large tree. I knew a rabbit was nearby, so I decided to set a trap right there. Pang Qian was overjoyed at the thought of eating meat. Using my professional experience, I set a well-disguised snare in the rabbit's frequent path. I also built another simple rope mechanism using a tree branch as a fulcrum and placed green pine needles inside to entice the hungry animal. With everything ready, my sister and I huddled together in a hidden snow pit, shivering in the freezing cold. After about an hour, a large, fluffy gray rabbit finally emerged cautiously from the snow. It weighed at least 6 or 7 catties. Just as it began to move forward, a pure white snow weasel appeared, planning an ambush. I realized that if the weasel drove the rabbit away, my snare would be useless. I quickly came up with a plan to surround the prey. I whispered to Pang Qian, telling her to wait for my signal, and then jump around to block one side while I blocked the other. When the snow weasel launched its attack, the rabbit bolted toward me. I instantly stood up, kicked up snow, and shouted to scare it. The panicked rabbit turned toward my sister. I yelled for Pang Qian to act, and she obediently jumped up and copied me. Trapped on both sides, the rabbit rushed down the only clear path I had left open for it. The moment it ran through, the mechanism triggered. The branch sprang up, and the noose tightened firmly around the rabbit's neck. The snow weasel was startled by my size and quickly disappeared into the snow. I ignored it and ran straight to the trap. The rabbit struggled for a moment before slowing down. I quickly stepped forward and dispatched it with my knife. Pang Qian tumbled through the snow to my side, staring at the prize with pure excitement. I carried the large 7-jin rabbit back to our small wooden house on the mountain. This cabin used to belong to my maternal grandfather, who was once the village's mountain guardian. In these difficult times of low grain standards, the deep, vast forests of Changbai Mountain were a forgotten corner, making hunting the only viable way for me to feed my family. However, I knew I would eventually need the Commune Brigade leader's approval to officially take up this role. When we arrived, my mother, Lu Shulan, was waiting outside our dilapidated shack, deeply anxious. Seeing the fresh rabbit, she burst into tears of relief. She told me my maternal uncle had secretly delivered 2 jin of corn flour to us, sent by my grandfather, who still didn't know we had been driven out by my abusive father and grandparents. I reassured her, handing over the rabbit and asking her to stew the meat and save the 2 large legs for roasting. Pang Qian clapped with joy, thrilled to finally taste meat for the first time in her 4 years of life. As my mother melted ice for cooking water, she begged me not to enter the dangerous mountain again, offering to find a washing job at the commune instead. To ease her mind, I joked about needing to make a living so I could find a wife in the future. She finally smiled and agreed, but insisted that I visit my uncle and grandfather to learn proper hunting skills first. Before she started cooking, I asked her for the paper packet she had secretly brought along, thinking it was the rat poison the original owner had noticed. My mother laughed and handed it over. When I opened it and tasted the white powder, I realized it was actually salt. She gently stroked my hair and explained that she only brought it to avoid making my grandfather feel guilty, and that she would never actually lead her children to their deaths. As my mother skinned the rabbit, I noticed the severe frostbite on her hands. Our small wooden cabin was drafty, and with the harshest winter days fast approaching, we urgently needed warm clothing. Since cotton was scarce and required cloth tickets, animal fur was our best option. I decided that catching a roe deer would provide the perfect hides, but I would need a hunting rifle for that. The commune captain owned one, and I figured I could borrow it by offering some meat as repayment. Soon the cabin filled with the rich aroma of stew. My mother poured the broth, giving me a bowl full of meat while taking only clear soup for herself. I immediately transferred some of my meat into her bowl and shared the rest with my little sister Pang Qian. It was a heartwarming moment, and my mother was deeply moved to see how much I had grown and changed. Suddenly, the door was rudely pushed open. It was my eldest stepbrother, Pang Dong. Without saying a word, he greedily reached out to grab a roasting rabbit leg. I instantly struck his hand with a fire poker, reminding him that our households were now separated. When he angrily confronted me, my mother tried to keep the peace by offering him the food. Instead, I drew my skinning knife and pressed it directly against his neck. With cold determination, I warned him that I would chop off his fingers if he ever touched my mother's or sister's things again. Terrified, he backed away. Pang Dong swallowed hard, watching me eat the meat. He claimed he came to give us a second chance because our father was no longer angry. In reality, he wanted us to return simply because there was no one left to do the heavy household chores. I flatly refused, stating that my mother was not anyone's maid. Pang Dong sneered, warning us that we would freeze to death on the mountain before storming out into the cold. My mother wanted to look after him, but I stopped her. I reminded her that he was a grown man who had never even called her mother, and there was no need to waste any worry on an ungrateful wolf. After eating our fill of rabbit meat, my mother, sister, and I felt warm all over. I decided it was time to find the team leader. The temperature was about to drop further, and our thin, tattered clothes wouldn't hold out. I planned to borrow a hunting rifle and head down the mountain to hunt roe deer for their hides. My mother was terrified when she heard about the gun. But she calmed down when I explained we would look for the animals down the mountain. Since she knew the layout of the dense forest, she agreed to come with me the next day to show me the way. I headed into the dark toward the Qinglong Ravine commune. Ever since my grandfather became immobile, the village lacked a proper mountain guardian to keep wild beasts away. I arrived at team leader Lu Hai's house and knocked on his adobe door. When he saw me, he immediately assumed I was there to beg for food, explaining that the commune was facing severe ration shortages. I quickly corrected him, stating that I only wanted to borrow the commune's single hunting rifle to go hunting. Lu Hai was skeptical and hesitant. He worried about wasting bullets and leaving the village defenseless against wild wolves. However, I proved that I knew what I was doing by telling him I had just trapped and eaten a large rabbit. Smelling the meat on me, he invited me inside. While sitting in the main room, I heard a baby crying. Lu Hai sadly revealed that his daughter-in-law had just given birth but had no milk due to malnutrition. Seizing the opportunity, I promised that if he lent me the gun, I would bring back meat to help his daughter-in-law produce milk. Desperate for a solution, Lu Hai brought out an old, well-maintained single-barrel hunting rifle. He made me demonstrate how to load and eject a bullet. Seeing my skilled handling, he finally relented. He handed me the gun along with 5 bullets, promising that if I successfully brought back meat to help his family, he would officially recommend me to the higher-ups to become the commune's new mountain guardian. I was thrilled to get the captain's promise for the mountain guardian position and the gun. However, with only 5 bullets, getting enough hides for my family would be difficult. To prepare, I dismantled some fallen fences and sharpened 3 sturdy wooden sticks as primitive backup weapons. Early the next morning, I took my mother and sister down to an uninhabited dense forest at the foot of the mountain. We each carried a sharpened stick. After tracking for over an hour through the quiet, freezing woods without seeing anything, my mother began to lose hope. She thought the roe deer had all been caught. I shook my head, pointing out the fresh bark gnawing marks left by herbivores. Following her suggestion, we walked another 40 minutes toward a sparser forest near the river where the commune had been logging. Suddenly, I spotted a mother roe deer leading 4 young ones. I told my mother and Pangqian to stay put and hide. I lay down in the snow, crawled forward, and aimed at the mother deer. My first shot missed due to the old gun's faulty calibration, but I didn't panic. Knowing the foolish, curious nature of roe deer, I immediately ran forward and fired a second shot, dropping the mother deer instantly. The others scattered, but I remained motionless in the snow, playing dead to exploit their natural curiosity. Sure enough, the deer soon returned to investigate the noise. One even came close to sniff me. I seized the moment, aimed, and fired my 3rd bullet, killing it on the spot. As the survivors panicked, I fired my 4th bullet and claimed a 3rd deer. With only 1 bullet left, I shot a slightly larger young deer in the leg to wound it, then rushed forward and finished it off with a woods's stick. 4 deer were down using 4 bullets. I excitedly called out to my mother, but then the smallest young deer actually trotted back out of sheer curiosity. It stared right at me. Without hesitation, I swung my wooden stick down to keep the family together. My mother ran over and stabbed it with her stick as well, while little Pangqian cheered them on. Exhausted, I collapsed happily into the snow. We had successfully taken down all 5 roe deer, leaving my mother completely dumbfounded by my incredible hunting skills. My mother and I worked together to process our abundant harvest at our cabin. She skillfully skinned and cut the meat, soaking the hides in warm water to smoke them for quick warmth. I carefully selected 40 to 50 caddies of prime meat to deliver to Captain Lu Hai along with the hunting rifle. The rest of our meat was safely left outside to freeze in nature's winter refrigerator. When I arrived at Lu Hai's house, I handed him the heavy load of meat. He was overjoyed, knowing this meat would help his malnourished daughter-in-law produce milk for his newborn grandson. I returned the rifle and casually mentioned that it felt a bit wobbly, claiming I had used all 5 bullets to catch 3 deer. I purposefully held back the fact that I actually got 5, avoiding unnecessary trouble. Lu Hai praised my skills and officially granted me full use of the mountain cabin. While he could not provide village grain rations, he promised to help me apply for a new rifle from the township. Before I left, Lu Hai gifted me some essential gear left by his father, including old animal traps, a bow missing its string, a quiver with 5 or 6 arrowheads, a bag of hemp, a small bottle of lamp oil, and a bag of salt. He advised me to twist a new bowstring out of the hemp and have my mother reinforce it with roe deer sinew, as she was the best bowstring maker in the village. I returned home excitedly to share the news that I was now the official mountain guardian. My mother wept with pride, seeing how much I had grown. We had 5 hides in total, which was enough to make warm fur coats for all 3 of us. She insisted on making mine first since I had to face the elements to hunt. While my mother worked on repairing the bow and preparing another meat dinner, my little sister Pangqian ran out to relieve herself. as both she and my mother were experiencing mild stomach trouble, adjusting to the sudden rich food. Despite the minor illness, we gathered happily for our meal, and I planned to set a few more traps nearby before resting in preparation for the dropping temperatures. Early the next morning, I drank some soup, grabbed my lasso and animal traps, and headed into the mountain to set them up. While I was away, my mother and sister stayed home to sew my new fur coat. My mother also took a few pieces of fresh roe deer meat to visit my maternal uncle, Lu Qing-song. He was overjoyed to hear I had become the official mountain guardian. To support me, he gave my mother a sturdy short spearhead left by my grandfather, a whetstone, and a large handful of unassembled bow parts, including highly lethal wolf's tooth arrows that cause heavy bleeding. When I returned home, I was thrilled to see this new equipment. I removed the decorative red tassel from the grandfather's short spear, revealing a pitch-black, blood-tested spearhead attached to an incredibly tough wooden handle. With my knife, short spear, and newly assembled bow and arrows, I now possessed high-quality weapons that gave me immense confidence. My mother measured my shoulder width to prioritize my fur coat since I had to face the extreme cold to hunt. I comforted her, promising I would stay near the base of the mountain and absolutely not venture into the dangerous deep forest. My mother then asked me to gather more firewood since we had used up our supply smoking the deer hides. I grabbed my new short spear for protection and went outside. While searching for dry, withered branches, I accidentally wandered a bit too far. When I leaned up to wipe my sweat, I noticed rows of dog-like footprints and fresh bloodstains on the ground. I carefully inspected the messy tracks and caught a specific scent in the air. My eyes widened as I realized these tracks belonged to a pack of wild wolves, not just an isolated pair. Realizing the immense danger, I quickly loaded the gathered firewood onto my back, gripped my short spear tightly, and ran straight home. A pack of wolves was far too deadly for me to fight alone with my current gear. When I reached the courtyard gate, I decided not to tell my mother the terrifying truth to keep her from panicking. However, looking at our dilapidated, broken wooden fence, I knew I had to find a quick way to repair and reinforce our courtyard wall, or a wolf pack could easily breach our home at night. As I stepped through the door carrying firewood, my second stepsister, Pong Nan, walked toward me wearing our family's old heavily patched military overcoat. She immediately began mocking me and my mother, calling us laborers and maids. She claimed our father had forgiven me and ordered me to return home to gather firewood for our grandparents so I wouldn't freeze to death. I treated her words with utter disdain. She even tried to tempt me by offering to lend me the overcoat for 2 days if I returned to work, but I told her coldly that she looked like a beggar in it. Just then, my little sister Pang Qian rushed out of the yard. She looked adorable and warm in a new padded jacket, leather skirt, leggings, and a hat made from a roe deer head with hanging rabbit fur. My mother followed her out, dressed in a roe deer skin vest and a leather skirt, carrying a matching roe deer skin overcoat, leggings, and a hat for me. As my mother and sister helped me put on the warm gear, Pong Nan's jealousy erupted. She angrily demanded to know why my mother hadn't made any clothes for her. My mother looked at her coldly and told her to ask her own family's adults instead of making a fuss at our house. My mother had protected Pang Nan from being bullied many times in the past, but Pang Nan never appreciated it. This final ingratitude completely broke my mother's lingering affection for that family. Compared to our thick, smooth fur coats, Pang Nan's overcoat was actually rotten on the inside and stuffed with rags. Feeling humiliated and jealous, she burst into tears and threatened to tell our father. I warned her to stop causing trouble, telling her that I was now the official mountain guardian of Qinglong Ravine Commune and would have Captain Lu Hai deal with her if she kept bothering us. Terrified by the captain's fearsome reputation, she ran away crying. My mother calmly told me to chop the firewood so she could stew meat for us. With the roe deer meat and warm clothing, we were safe, for now, but I knew our drafty wooden house still could not withstand the extreme cold. I realized we had to repair and reinforce the house as soon as possible to survive the deep winter. I realized that repairing our house and building a strong courtyard wall To keep wolves away would require significant timber and manpower. To hire a carpenter and helpers, I needed to provide meals, which meant I had to find more food quickly. Early the next morning, I ate some roasted meat on the way and checked my snares. I was thrilled to find one rabbit. However, my excitement turned to intense vigilance when I discovered another snare was severely damaged, surrounded by wolf footprints and fresh blood. The wolves were active right around cabin last night. I quickly reset the trap, cleared the blood tracks to protect my family, and planned to report this danger to Captain Lu Hai. My heavier animal traps yielded nothing, so I backed away to let my scent dissipate and headed deeper into the forest with my bow and arrows. Suddenly, I spotted a pack of wolves on a nearby ridge driving a flock of wild goats. The leading goat fell off the cliff. I remembered my mother mentioning that wolves use this tactic to store frozen carcasses for the winter. Realizing these fallen goats could be the perfect meal tickets to pay my workers, I marked the location to safely return the next day. As I prepared to head back, I spotted a lost wild goat bleeding in the trees. I quietly drew my bow. Because my current physical strength was weak, I could not pull it fully and had to rely on a high arc shot. Calculating the distance and wind, I released the arrow. It struck the goat, causing it to cry out and flee downhill. I pursued it from above, found a clean angle, and threw my heavy short spear with all my might. The spear pierced its back, and the goat crashed into the snow. I scrambled down the slippery slope and pressed the spear shaft down until the goat stopped moving. Recovering my reusable wolf-tooth arrow and short spear, I collapsed in exhaustion. Suddenly, a chilling wolf howl echoed through the forest. My hair stood on end. Pushing past my fatigue, I immediately grabbed the heavy carcass and began dragging it toward home, eager to escape the wolves and enjoy a hot bowl of goat soup. I dragged the heavy wild goat carcass all the way back to our small wooden house, breaking a sweat in the deep snow for the first time since my rebirth. The sky was already darkening as I arrived. My mother was waiting anxiously at the door, and her face lit up with a relieved smile when she saw the big prize. I told her I had gotten lucky, and also located a frozen stash of several more goats driven off a cliff by wild wolves. She instantly became terrified upon hearing about the wolves, but I reassured her that I stayed back and would not venture into the deep mountain alone. I explained my plan to her. I wanted to use some of the goat meat to treat the villagers to a meal, so they would help us fix our broken outer fence, dig a cellar, and build a vegetable pit. Furthermore, I hoped to set up large traps to drive the wolves away. When my mother pulled my ear and scolded me for being reckless, I detailed my analysis of the wolf pack's behavior. I suspected a larger rival pack had driven these wolves here, meaning they would not leave on their own. My mother stared at me in shock, amazed at how smart I had become after freezing, but she proudly stroked my head and went to prepare dinner. While my mother and sister gutted the goat, stored the meat, and saved the hide for clothing, I warmed my hands by the stove. Soon I was enjoying a steaming bowl of delicious goat soup. However, I realized that eating only meat was not ideal for my young sister's development. Our flour supply was running out, and I needed to find a way to secure more staple foods. I knew that during this era, hunters often traded meat, medicine, and furs on the black market to get supplies, so I decided to consider that option once our home was fully secure. After dinner, I went to visit Captain Lu Hai to report the wolf tracks. He broke out in a cold sweat and scolded me for my boldness, explaining that he still could not let me keep the commune's single rifle because the villagers needed it for security. I smiled and explained that I only came to borrow some manpower. I promised to provide meat meals for the workers and shared my scorched earth strategy to trap the wolves and protect the village. Lu Hai contemplated my idea for a moment, nodded in approval, and promised to send workers to help me first thing tomorrow morning. Early the next morning, Captain Lu Hai arrived at my door with about 20 able-bodied young men. They carried weapons and tools for protection and labor. I organized the crew into groups. One group would go into the mountain with me to retrieve the goats, another would cut wood, and the rest would start repairing our courtyard fence and digging a cellar. I also plan to build large traps and a lookout post to protect both our home and the village from the wolves. I promise to provide plenty of meat for everyone. To match my offer, Lu Hai excitedly agreed that the brigade would supply the staple food for lunch. I led a team of 12 men straight to the bottom of the cliff. The frozen goat carcasses were scattered across the snow. I did not mention the wolves to avoid scaring the men. Instead, I claimed I had simply driven the lead goat down the mountain, causing the flock to jump. The men were deeply impressed by my explanation. We loaded the packed carcasses onto 3 snow sleds and chanted work songs as we hauled them back. When we returned around noon, Lu Hai and my mother were grinning from ear to ear at the massive harvest. My mother gathered a few local women to help clean the goats. Lu Hai ordered the village cooks to prepare goat offal soup for lunch and a massive mutton feast for dinner. The workers gained a massive boost in energy. Since the winter ground was frozen hard, they lit fires to soften the soil before driving in rows of small tree stakes for the fence. They also expanded our old cellar and connected it directly to the inside of our cabin so we could hide easily if wolves attacked. I helped out by constructing large snares, wooden obstacles, and a simple lookout platform high up in a large tree. As the rich aroma of meat filled the air, I called for a lunch break. Lu Hai patted my shoulder and promised to make me the mountain patrol captain in the future. Seizing the opportunity, I asked if my mother could eventually work for the village to earn work points. Lua smiled and agreed, adding that my sister could also go to school. Feeling a deep warmth in my heart, I thanked him gratefully before he urged me to go catch up with my uncle. When Captain Lu Hai reminded me to look after my family, I realized I needed to strengthen my bond with my relatives. My grandfather and uncle had always been good to us, and my mother only stayed away to protect my grandfather's health. I walked over to help my uncle, Lu Ching Song, who was carefully checking our new wooden fence. I insisted that he bring his wife and children over to join the feast. He gladly ran home to fetch them. My mother was deeply touched by my actions and handed me a bowl of hot water. She let me know we had plenty of meat left, along with extra sheepskins. When I asked her about a local black market to trade the hides for grain, Lu Hai overheard and confirmed its existence down the mountain. He warned me to be extremely careful. He also mentioned that guns and bullets could be bought there, though they were quite expensive. Soon my aunt and cousins arrived. We all enjoyed a lunch of corn cakes and mutton soup. In the afternoon, I guided the workers to set up protective traps, while my mother and aunt prepared the mutton for dinner. Thanks to the village's hard work, our fences, expanded rooms, and patched house were fully completed by evening. I finally had my own small room, which connected directly to our reinforced cellar, where we could hide from wild beasts and store dried meat. I fell asleep groggily after the long day, knowing I had to go hunting again tomorrow to replenish our food supply. However, right before I fell fully asleep, a faint rhythmic rustling sound made me alert. Thanks to my past training as a sniper, I instantly recognized the sound of rapid, heavy panting coming through the wooden wall. It was not human. I jumped out of bed, rushed into the main room, and saw my mother still working under the dim lamp. I quickly told her to lower her voice, "Wake up, my little sister," and head straight into the cellar. I warned her that the wolves had finally arrived. I held my breath in the darkness, knowing that the scent of today's mutton feast had drawn the wolves to our yard. My mother was terrified, but I quickly hurried her and my little sister Pang Qian into the newly built cellar. I refused to go down with them, knowing that if the wolves breached the house and cornered us there, we would all die. I closed the lid, covered it to hide their location, blew out the oil lamp, and waited in complete silence with my short spear and bow. 3 wolves managed to bypass our unfinished fence section and slipped into the yard. One of them began digging at the exterior wall of my room, trying to breach the wood. Instead of rushing outside blindly, I stayed hidden and cracked the front door open slightly to set a trap. Drawn by the opening, a wolf cautiously poked its head and nose inside. I waited patiently until its entire body cleared the threshold. Then, I slammed the door shut and lunged forward, plunging my short spear deep into its body. The wolf struggled violently, nearly throwing me off, but I used all my weight to pin it down. I gripped the back of its neck, drew my small skinning knife, and stabbed its throat repeatedly until it stopped moving. Drenched in sweat, I quickly closed the door again. Outside, the remaining two wolves smelled their companion's blood and began whimpering with hostility. They focused on the door but hesitated to charge. I gripped my bow, pulled the door open, and fired a powerful arrow into the darkness. The arrow struck one wolf directly in the eye, causing it to howl and flee toward a corner of the fence. Terrified by the sudden attack, the third wolf turned and bolted out of the yard. I did not give chase, knowing a larger pack might be waiting outside. Instead, I approached the blinded, whimpering wolf trapped in the corner and finished it off with a swift strike of my short spear. Single-handedly, without a gun, I had successfully defended our home and killed two hungry wolves. After blocking the gap in the fence to secure the yard, I opened the cellar cover. My mother rushed out, crying in terror when she saw my blood-covered face. I smiled and reassured her that the blood belonged to the beasts, pointing to the carcass on the floor. She held up the oil lamp, completely shocked and breathless to discover that her son had actually killed two wild wolves all by himself. My mother was completely astounded that I had killed two wolves single-handedly and escaped without a single scratch. She knew that having the official status of a mountain guardian would allow me to hunt legally in the deep forest to support the family. Still, she carefully wiped the blood from my face and tearfully warned me never to be reckless, reminding me how my grandfather had been permanently crippled by a lone wolf ambush years ago. I comforted her and picked up my terrified, crying little sister Pang Qian, holding her close until she finally calmed down. My mother boiled water to clean me up, and then she got to work skinning the wolves and processing the carcasses while I went back to sleep. The next morning, the villagers gathered outside our house and stood completely stunned at the sight of the fresh wolf skins drying at our entrance. Captain Lu Hai pushed through the crowd and inspected the professional short spear punctures on the hides. My mother came out and explained that a pack of 3 wolves had breached the yard last night, and I had killed 2 of them while one escaped. Lu Hai was overjoyed, shouting to the villagers that our new mountain guardian could protect them all. Fueled by this news, the men worked with immense energy and completely finished repairing the rest of our defensive fence by noon. By the time I finally woke up, the workers had already left. My mother brought me a bowl of meat and bread, proudly handing over an official appointment letter from Captain Lu Hai. This paper legally secured my position as the brigade's youngest mountain guardian, protecting me from any accusations of illegal hunting. As I ate, I pointed out that we should use our extra animal hides to trade for grain before the heavy snow locked down the mountain. My mother was initially worried about the risks of the illegal black market, but she agreed that hunters like us were rarely targeted. She smiled and promised to show me the way down the mountain, as she knew exactly where the secret market was located. Hunting relies heavily on luck and the weather, and since the wolves had cleared out the nearby animals, my snares were all empty. To find something to trade for grain, I had no choice but to venture deeper into the freezing mountain. While tracking, I suddenly spotted a wild boar foraging. My bow and arrows were useless against its thick hide, so I tried to back away cautiously. To my horror, another wild boar appeared behind me, trapping me between them. Just then, a wild fox appeared out of nowhere. In the Northeast, foxes are respected as spiritual beings, so I froze. Suddenly, the first wild boar noticed me and charged. I braced my grandfather's short spear against a tree trunk. The boar slammed directly into it, impaling its own skull and dying instantly. The second wild boar squealed in rage and charged. I sprinted toward the fox and rolled into the snow. The boar couldn't stop its momentum and head-butted the fox, sending it flying. Enraged, the wild boar turned back toward me. I fired 2 arrows into its rear and led it on a chaotic chase through the dense trees, causing it to repeatedly smash its head against the trunks. Exhausted and bleeding, the boar faced me on a stone cliff. I drew my bow fully and shot an arrow straight into its eye socket. The blinded beast charged blindly. Just as it reached me, I leaped high over its body. The boar lunged off the edge of the cliff, crashing to its death below. I took a deep breath and noticed the fox was still alive, limping toward me and watching me like a docile dog. I decided not to harm it, as doing so would upset the villagers and worry my mother. I tied the legs of both wild boars and used the slippery snow to drag them down the mountain. The fox followed me silently all the way to our wooden house. Realizing its leg was injured, I let it rest in our yard. When my mother pushed the door open, she stood completely frozen. She looked at the two massive wild boars, then stared in shock at the golden-furred fox, crying out that I had brought home a sacred spirit. My mother stared at the golden-furred fox in our yard, completely convinced it was the sacred spirit, Grandma Hu III. I tried to explain it was just a regular fox, but she strictly warned me to show the creature utmost respect. To avoid a long explanation about how I killed the wild boars, I played along and joked that the sacred fox had helped me and gifted me the meat. My mother immediately believed it. We quickly got to work processing the meat so we could head down the mountain to the black market before dark. My mother fed the offal to the fox, which ate happily and then curled up to sleep peacefully in our yard. Later that afternoon, my mother and I carried a heavy sack of wild boar meat to the secret market hidden in the woods outside a nearby village. My mother recognized an old man smoking a pipe named Grandpa Gao, who traded mountain goods. She greeted him and introduced me as her son. When Grandpa Gao asked if we had any mountain goods in this icy weather, I opened the sack to reveal the wild boar meat, explaining that I had taken over my grandfather's hunting job. Grandpa Gao inspected the meat and offered 5 cents a catty, which was the premium rate he used to give my grandfather. In the late 1950s, this was a generous price. After hauling the meat to his narrow storage room, he calculated the weight and handed us a grand total of 56 yuan and 5 cents. While inside, my eyes caught a Mauser pistol resting on a shelf. Grandpa Gao noticed my interest and asked if I wanted the quick slow machine. He noted that while it was a famous combat weapon against the Japanese, it was not typically used for hunting. I explained that a compact automatic pistol would be much lighter to carry on the mountain and would give me a better chance of self-preservation during an ambush. My mother worried I might shoot myself, but Grandpa Gao agreed with my logic. He revealed that the pistol was his old partner from his days fighting the Japanese and that it wasn't for sale. However, he offered me a special deal. He explained that his grandson was getting married and he needed food for the wedding banquet. He promised that if I could catch 100 big fish for him, he would give me the Mauser pistol, its leather holster, and a full box of ammunition. I nodded without any hesitation and accepted the challenge. I carried the heavy bag of grain along the mountain path while my mother walked beside me. Seeing my thin frame shoulder the weight of our home, she couldn't help but shed tears of pride. We had spent 22 yuan from our wild boar sale to buy 200 caddies of rice and flour. This supply was enough to ensure we would not starve during the freezing winter. When we pushed open the door to our cabin, I was relieved to find the golden fox gently playing with my little sister Pong Qian. Seeing that the clever animal could comfortably watch over my sister, I decided to let it stay inside by the warm stove fire. I told my mother that I planned to go ice fishing the next day to catch the 100 big fish needed to trade for Grandpa Gao's Mauser pistol. I needed a compact firearm for self-defense against wolves and the dangerous escaped convicts that often hid in the forest. My mother agreed with my reasoning and offered to join me, leaving Pong Qian safely at home with the fox. Early the next morning, I visited Captain Lu Hai and borrowed a public ice pick from the brigade headquarters. On my way back, I ran into my uncle, Lu Qing-song. When I told him about my deal with Grandpa Gao, he completely supported me. He agreed that a light, automatic pistol was much better for my thin physique than a heavy hunting rifle. He eagerly rushed home to grab his ice axe so he could join our fishing trip. When my uncle entered our yard, the golden fox stepped forward and growled protectively. Pang Qian quickly stroked its head and calmed it down, showing that the animal understood her. My uncle was terrified at first, but my mother explained that the fox had saved my life and was simply seeking shelter from the extreme cold. Hearing this, My uncle laughed heartily, declaring that I was truly meant to be the mountain guardian, and that even the spirits of the mountain were protecting me. My mother and my uncle, Lu Qingsung, accompanied me to a lake near the forest at the front of the mountain to go ice fishing. After I pinpointed the right location, my uncle and I used ice picks to carve 4 ventilation holes to attract the fish with oxygen. My mother neatly prepared the 4 fishing nets. Because this open area was a water source for wild beasts, I stayed completely alert to our surroundings. While waiting for the nets, I fashioned wire hooks, drilled smaller holes, and used cornmeal to catch small miscellaneous fish. I pulled up quite a few, which I stuffed into my pockets. When my uncle felt enough time had passed, we pulled up the first net together. It was completely packed with cultural burnus, 3-lined fish, and silver carp. We caught an enormous amount of fish across the first 2 nets. I told my mother to hide our best fish in a tattered bag and put the miscellaneous ones in a nicer bag so any onlookers would only ask for the lower quality catch. We decided to stop after the second net because we couldn't carry any more. I packed a full bag of premium fish for my uncle to take to his family. As we pulled our loaded sleds back toward the forest edge, my sharp senses picked up a faint sound. I raised my hand to stop my mother and uncle, pulling out my bow and short spear. My uncle initially heard nothing, but soon caught the sound of distant, frantic footsteps. I realized a group of people was under attack. I forcefully ordered my uncle to take my mother and hide, stepping forward as the official mountain guardian. Shocked by my sudden authority, he took my mother and ducked into the trees. I drew my bow and ran toward the commotion. A panicked crowd was fleeing out into the open, chased by a small pack of wild wolves. One slower runner was suddenly tackled to the ground, screaming for help as the others abandoned him. I stood my ground, drew my bowstring to full tension, and released a powerful arrow. The shot struck the lead wolf cleanly in its eye socket, causing it to howl and flee. Gripping my heavy short spear, I charged forward like a burst of lightning to face the remaining wolves. I leaped forward and drove my short spear directly through the struggling wolf's body, pinning it to the ground with my feet. To intimidate the rest of the pack, I wiped the wolf's blood onto my face with 3 fingers and let out a fierce roar. Terrified, the remaining wolves lowered their ears and quickly fled. I checked on the injured villager and confirmed his wounds were not fatal. The other adults, who had been fleeing in a panic, approached with immense guilt and insisted on pulling our loaded ice rafts back to the village. When we arrived, Captain Lu Hai was preparing a rescue team. He ruthlessly scolded the crowd for recklessly entering the back mountain just because they saw a teenager like me hunting successfully. He strictly announced that only I had legal authority to enter this part of the mountain, and anyone else would be accused of stealing public property. Seeking to build goodwill, I stepped forward and took part of the blame, promising to drive the remaining wolves away as soon as possible. Lu Hai appreciated my attitude and told the villagers that while hunting remained restricted, they could trade food or goods with me, or even work for me to get mountain products. He loudly declared that our brigade was now my family's maternal home, and that the village would fiercely protect my mother, my sister, and me from my abusive father. The villagers applauded and fully accepted us. I opened my sack and gifted 2 big fish to the injured man to stew for his recovery. I asked the community for only one thing: to welcome my little sister, to play with the local children, and to visit my mother so she wouldn't feel lonely while I was away hunting. The crowd warmly agreed, cementing our bond. Suddenly, the village accountant ran into the crowd, gasping for breath. He warned me that my abusive father had just arrived in the village, absolutely furious, and looking like he wanted to kill someone. Lu Hai's face darkened instantly. He ordered the villagers to grab their weapons and stand up against the intruder. The united crowd fiercely gripped their tools, shouting in unison to kill him as we marched forward together. We marched into the empty space of the village, where a crowd of local villagers had already surrounded my abusive father, Pang Yufu. He looked thin, weak, and terrified, yet he still managed to loudly curse my mother, calling her a shameful spendthrift woman. My uncle Lu Qingsong became completely enraged. He charged forward holding his ice pick, ready to strike his sister's abuser. Captain Lu Hai quickly snatched the weapon away to prevent a murder, but he then ordered the villagers to release my uncle. Once freed, my uncle leaped forward and fiercely kicked my father to the ground, slapping his face wildly for all the years of abuse he inflicted on my mother and us. My mother initially wanted to stop the fight, but I gripped her arm and shook my head. I told her that it was only right for an uncle to defend his sister against an abusive husband using his bare hands, especially here in her maiden home. The other villagers joined in, pretending to break up the fight while actually pinning my father down so my uncle could land more punches. When Lu Hai finally called off the beating, my father angrily told my mother never to return. Backed by the united village and my own growing capability, my mother stood tall and coldly announced that she was divorcing him. My stunned father demanded the return of his original bride price. My uncle and Lu Hai instantly shut him down, shouting that his family must first return the premium, furs and meat from my mother's original dowry, along with back wages for all her years of hard labor. Desperate, my father demanded that the children be returned to him instead. At that moment, I stepped forward. I was covered in wolf blood, with a wolf carcass gripped tightly in my hand. My cold, wild stare completely petrified him. As I moved toward him like a tiger descending a mountain, his legs went entirely weak, and he collapsed onto the ground. He trembled and weakly screamed that I was an unfilial son. I sneered with utter disdain, reminding him that our households were already separated and ordering him to get lost. Lu Hai stepped up and fiercely warned my father that I was now an official member of the brigade, and if he ever touched me again, he would find himself buried alive on the back mountain. Terrified for his life, my father scrambled to his feet to flee. As he turned, Lu Hai's son rushed over and kicked him flat onto his face, prompting wild laughter from the crowd. Finally, my aunt untied the local guard dog and sent it charging after him, forcing my cowardly father to scurry out of the village in total humiliation. After my abusive father ran away, Captain Lu Hai held a general brigade meeting in the courtyard. The rumors of me killing wolves single-handedly were fully confirmed when the villagers saw the wolf carcass I brought back. Lu Hai addressed the crowd, using the pale and bandaged Lu Erzu as a clear example of the immense dangers of the back mountain. Lu Erzu admitted his mistake and openly thanked me for saving his life. Lu Hai strictly reiterated that no one else was allowed to enter the mountain, and he initially suggested giving the commune's old hunting rifle to me. I immediately stood up and declined the long rifle, explaining that it was too cumbersome and loud for my hunting style. A local widow named Kai Widow suggested that the brigade help me get a compact short gun instead. Lu Hai agreed with her idea and promised to issue an official approval document so I wouldn't face legal trouble for acquiring a gun. He also announced that the brigade would advance me 50 yuan toward the purchase, with the rest to be reimbursed next year. I smiled and promised that once I secured the gun and bullets, I would completely eliminate the wolf threat for everyone. When Kai Widow jokingly questioned my ability, my mother proudly stepped forward. She revealed that the sacred golden fox, Grandmahu III, had recognized my skills and was currently sheltering at our house. My uncle Lu Kingsong backed her up, noting that the legendary creature actually seemed to fear me. Hearing this, the superstitious villagers fully accepted my authority. Through a collective vote, the brigade officially approved for our family of 3 to join the Qinglong Ravine Brigade, allowing my mother to finally return to work and earn work points. They also voted to legalize private trading between the villagers and me, promising to severely punish anyone who informed the authorities. Just as the meeting dispersed, a hunched figure walked out from behind the crowd. My mother shivered all over as a stern voice rang out, asking her why she had decided on a divorce without consulting her own father first. My grandfather walked out with a cane, and my mother immediately knelt on the ground with a thud. Grandpa sighed, telling her to get up and not let others laugh, and ordered us to go inside. Once we entered his small courtyard, the atmosphere became very oppressive. My uncle tried to defend my mother, explaining she had no choice. Grandpa asked her directly if she was determined to get a divorce, and she could only nod silently. When he asked if my father had been beating her ever since their marriage, my mother struggled to reply, so I spoke up for her. I told him that my father was a gambling coward who had been hitting her for as long as I could remember. Grandpa slammed the table, angrily asking my mother why she hadn't come home sooner. She admitted with tears in her eyes that she was simply afraid of making him feel guilty. Grandpa turned his gaze to me, asking why I had defied my father so publicly. I calmly replied that reputation cannot be exchanged for food, nor could it stop my mother from being abused. Grandpa's anger softened, and he laughed, telling us to move into the main room. My grandmother was waiting inside, and she broke down in tears, hugging my mother and wishing she had returned sooner. Grandpa sat on the heated brick bed, struggling to move his injured legs. He fully supported the divorce and offered 20 won of his medical retirement savings to pay off my father's bride price demand. My mother and uncle refused to take it, but Grandpa explained that giving the money would keep my father from lingering, ensuring we would be firmly in the right if we ever needed to beat him again. I told Grandpa that I could handle the money myself, so he didn't need to worry. Grandpa looked at me with pride, pleased that his grandson was taking over the family craft after fighting off wolves. He opened his bed cabinet and handed me a sheepskin map. It was the culmination of his life's work, detailing animal distributions, dangerous regions, and a secret minority village where I could safely trade mountain goods by using his name. Furthermore, Grandpa pushed a long, thin bundle toward me, explaining that according to ancestral rules, a man must carry a family weapon onto the mountain. I opened the bundle and discovered a beautifully preserved samurai sword. Grandpa proudly revealed it was a trophy from a Japanese ronin he had killed during the war. I held up the sword and noticed the name Honda Kyohachiro carved on it. Grandpa smiled, noting that the blood-stained weapon would serve as an excellent defense tool to protect me in the wilderness. Taking the samurai sword felt like receiving a heavy legacy from my grandfather. Though not built for hunting, it gave me a fierce tool to fight back against wild beasts. Grandpa smiled, pleased with my determination to deal with the wolves, and signaled my grandmother. She opened a large cabinet and brought out a magnificent bearskin cloak, wrapping it gently around my shoulders. Then, Grandpa removed a beast-tooth necklace from his own neck and placed it over my head. He explained that this token had been passed down through generations of true mountain guardians. Looking closely at the massive tiger fang, I saw the word might carved on one side and prudence on the other. Wearing this meant I had received the full recognition of our lineage. Grandpa warned me that wolves are incredibly cunning, and the only way to defeat the pack was to hunt down the Wolf King. He noted that my physical strength alone wasn't enough to face the beast, making a gesture to remind me that I would need a firearm. I nodded in full agreement. We discussed the habits of wolves, and he shared his lifetime of invaluable hunting knowledge and strategies, filling me with immense confidence for the upcoming battle. My family's overwhelming kindness and unity brought a deep warmth to my heart. Fearing my mother would lack basic supplies, the old man packed up bedding and daily necessities for us to take back. We returned home loaded with bags, and I climbed over the fence to find Pong Qian happily playing with the intelligent fox. She pounced into my arms with a bright smile. My mother and uncle arrived shortly after, dragging the heavy ice sled packed with our massive catch of frozen fish. Pong Qian cheered, thrilled that we wouldn't go hungry. I assured her there was plenty of food for the fox as well. My uncle helped us unload the sled and insisted on returning the public tools down the mountain himself. Since it was pitch dark and wolves were active nearby, I grabbed my weapons and insisted on walking my uncle part of the way back to the village for his safety. We walked down the small path in complete darkness. As we neared the edge of the village, my chatting stopped abruptly. I looked coldly up toward a large rock on the mountain. Dimly, we could see a massive wolf standing there, its green eyes glowing as it stared directly at us. My uncle panicked, urging me to run and call the villagers, but I shook my head grimly, realizing that we were already completely surrounded by the beasts. My uncle, Lu Ching Song, panicked when we realized we were being ambushed by wolves. I quickly told him that we had to retreat toward my trap area to stand a chance. We backed each other up cautiously, trying not to show fear, but the rustling and heavy breathing of a large pack surrounded us. When the wolves began testing us and two suddenly leaped out, our retreat route was cut off. I fiercely ordered my uncle to run for it while I stayed behind to cover him. As my uncle bolted, I thrust my short spear forward and killed the first oncoming wolf instantly. Smoothly transitioning, I drew my bow and shot the second wolf cleanly in the eye socket at close range. Before I could recover my spear, another wolf lunged at my head from the bushes. I pulled hard, shook the spear, and thrust it directly into the beast's throat. Drenched in wolf blood and wrapped in my bearskin cloak, I terrified the rest of the pack, making them mistake me for a wild bear. They hesitated, trying to slowly encircle me instead of charging. I seized the opening and ran toward the traps, stopping after 20 steps. A wolf leaped to pounce from behind, but I anticipated its move and executed a sharp counter-thrust. The strike killed the wolf, but the wooden shaft of my grandfather's short spear finally snapped under the pressure. Relying on my special forces' survival instincts, I drew my samurai sword without a moment's delay. I plunged the blade into one wolf and then executed a swift horizontal slash, severing the neck of another leaping beast in midair. With the remaining wolves temporarily shocked, I ran to my uncle's side and urged him to climb a tree. Once he was secure, I took a running start, leaped high, and knocked my sword in my mouth to effortlessly flip myself onto the branch of the tallest tree. I quickly drew my bow and shot an arrow into the bushes, mapping a perfect hit that left a wolf howling in pain. As the rest of the pack charged blindly, they began triggering my traps. One wolf was instantly hoisted into the air by a hidden rope snare, while another crashed into a pit trap. When its companions jumped down to rescue it, I lit a pre-prepared fire arrow wrapped in lard and hemp, launching it straight into the pit. The trap erupted in flames, burning the trapped wolves and terrifying the survivors into a whimpering retreat. Suddenly, a thunderous wolf howl echoed from deep within the forest, completely different from the others. I looked excitedly into the distance, knowing the Wolf King had finally been drawn out. The heavy thud of animal footsteps and low wolf roars echoed as the Wolf King led the pack to encircle us. Looking down from my high branch, I was astonished to see a completely snow-white wolf. Seeing this rare white wolf king, intense killing intent flared within me. I knew that if I could kill the leader, the remaining pack would fall into a chaotic struggle for dominance and retreat. The white wolf king sat down and howled, commanding the pack to charge. While several wolves swarmed the base of my tree, others launched a coordinated assault on my uncle, Lu Qing-song, leaping up to force him down. Some wolves even began clawing and biting at his tree roots to fell it, while others stacked on top of each other to climb. I shot the base wolf of the stack, breaking the leg of the climber as they collapsed. However, another wolf immediately took its place. Realizing I only had 5 arrows left and my uncle was in mortal danger, I decided to execute a desperate ground assault to target the Wolf King. I used a rope to firmly tie my samurai sword to my hand. Despite my draining stamina, I jumped straight down into the swarming pack, swinging the long blade in a berserk frenzy. Blood splattered everywhere as I carved a path straight toward the leader. Inspired by my charge, my uncle jumped down too, ruthlessly slaying several wolves with his ice pick. The White Wolf King bared its fangs and lunged at me. I slashed at its claws, but it agilely dodged. Seizing the opening, my uncle rushed in from the side and plunged his ice pick deep into the Wolf King's thigh. As the beast howled in pain, a sudden, rapid rustling sound echoed through the trees, accompanied by strange whimpering noises. The distraction broke the Wolf King's focus. Capitalizing on the split second, I gathered all my remaining strength and delivered a massive slash across the White Wolf King's chest. Turning my head toward the noise, I finally saw the source of the distraction. It was our golden fox. I never expected the golden fox to raid the wolf pack's den. She cleverly drew a large portion of the pack away by mimicking the cries of dying wolf cubs. This sudden chaos shattered the White Wolf King's focus, providing me with a perfect opening. Gathering my absolute last ounce of strength, I drove my samurai sword deep into the White Wolf King's chest. As it collapsed, gasping for air, I moved swiftly and slit its throat to finish it off. Stepping onto the dead Wolf King's carcass, I let out a fierce roar to challenge the remaining wolves. Horrified to see their leader slain, the survivors abandoned the fight and fled blindly into the forest. With the danger past, my hands began to tremble from extreme exhaustion, and I collapsed onto the snow. My panicked uncle Lu Qingsong rushed to my side. I grinned at him, joking that we now had a story to brag about for the rest of our lives. After recovering our breath, my uncle retrieved the heavy ice sled and began stacking the numerous wolf carcasses onto it. Meanwhile, I retraced our steps to look for my scattered arrows. While searching the dry grass, I heard a faint trembling whimper. I pushed the brush aside with my blade and discovered two very light-colored wolf cubs. Initially, I thought about killing them, but they eagerly ran out and affectionately circled my legs. Because I was covered in the White Wolf King's blood, they seemed to recognize his scent and bonded with me instantly. I stuffed the warm cubs safely into my coat. My uncle was terrified when he saw them, warning me that wolves could never be tamed, but I smiled and argued that they could be raised as excellent hunting companions. We hauled the loaded ice sled back to the mountain cabin in total darkness. My mother, Lu Xiulan, rushed out to help us, gasping in horror when she saw a sled packed entirely with dead wolves. When she reached out to check me for injuries, the movement inside my coat startled her. I showed her the two wolf cubs and explained my plan to train them. She immediately objected, but I pointed out that we already had a wild fox at home, so two wolf cubs wouldn't make a difference. Just then, the golden fox trotted calmly into the yard and slid past us into the house. Watching her, I couldn't help but wonder if she truly possessed a human-like spirit. My mother quickly slapped my shoulder, scolding me for disrespecting the sacred creature. My mother, Lu Xiulan, was astounded when my uncle, Lu Qingsong, revealed that I had killed the massive White Wolf King single-handedly. My job as the mountain guardian was now fully secure. Instead of crying with joy, my mother wept out of heartache, knowing I had fought for this victory with my life. My uncle comforted her, noting that the wolf threat was now gone, and then left for his own home. I brought two young wolf cubs inside and told my little sister, Pang Qian, they were puppies. She happily named them Daqiang and Erqiang. I fed them fish instead of wolf meat. Outside, my mother worked under the oil lamp to skin the Wolf King and process the meat, carefully keeping its claws and teeth as my trophies. The next morning, I began physical training to improve my stamina, determined never to rely entirely on luck again. Soon, Captain Lu Hai arrived and praised me as a hero. He offered me a ride down the mountain on the brigade's mule cart, which was hauling fodder. He reiterated his support for me getting a firearm and promised to find a replacement steel barrel for my broken short spear. I accepted his help gratefully, and the villagers helped load my sacks of frozen fish onto the cart. I hitched a ride down the mountain, avoiding a long walk. Upon arrival at the black market, I unloaded the fish and greeted Grandpa Gao, announcing that I had brought his requested catch. Without looking up, the old man pointed to his back room. Inside, I found a small cloth package containing the Mauser pistol, its leather holster, and a heavy supply of bullets. I happily tested the grip of the compact automatic gun. When I returned to the front counter, I asked Grandpa Gao if he wanted to inspect the fish. He simply pointed at the tiger fang necklace around my neck and replied that it wasn't necessary. He explained that the necklace was proof that I was an official hunter acknowledged by the mountain god. He told me that no true hunter would ever ruin their reputation for petty gain, reminding me that a hunter's honor is just as important as his skill. I hurried straight home with the package from Grandpa Gao. I felt much more relieved once I was safely inside our cabin with the Mauser pistol. My mother, Lu Xiulan, warned me to hide the firearm well and only use it when hunting on the mountain to avoid trouble. I agreed, noting that a compact automatic pistol was perfect for self-defense in the wilderness. Suddenly, my uncle, Lu Qingsong, arrived at our door out of breath. He warned us that my overbearing grandmother had just entered the village to cause trouble. My mother wanted to step in, but I stopped her. I told her that I would handle the situation and asked her to gather 2 specific bags of frozen fish left in our storage corner. My mother realized what I was planning, and she couldn't help but chuckle as my uncle and I carried the bags down to the village square. A large crowd of angry villagers had already surrounded my crying grandmother. The moment she spotted me, she grabbed my arm and pretended to be the victim. I coldly pulled away and asked if she had come to demand the return of the original family grain. When she nodded, I placed the heavy bags on the ground. I told her that we had no grain left, but I would give her these fish to fully settle the debt. However, I made a strict condition in front of the entire village. Once she accepted these bags, she was never allowed to bother us again. My greedy grandmother opened the bags, and her eyes lit up at the sight of the frozen fish. She accepted the deal. I told her to call my second uncle, who was hiding outside the village, to come haul the heavy load away before I turned and walked back home with my uncle. As we walked, my uncle curiously asked why the fish in those bags looked so small. I chuckled and revealed the truth. I explained that one bag was meant to feed our fox, and the other contained scraps meant for local guard dogs, which my mother had sorted out the night before. My uncle's eyes widened in shock, and he laughed, calling me a little rascal for paying off my grandmother with dog food. Meanwhile, my second uncle entered the village square, loaded the bags onto a borrowed production team donkey, and headed back home. Eager to keep the prize for himself before his mother could claim it, he closed his front door and poured out the contents of the bags onto the floor with his wife. The couple stood completely dumbfounded. Underneath a thin layer of broken large fish, the bags were filled entirely with tiny miscellaneous fish and frozen animal offal. At my second uncle's house, his wife dismissed his worries about the scraps, pointing out that offal was still food for a family with nothing to eat. They quickly sorted through the bags and stewed a pot of fish soup that very evening. Meanwhile, my grandmother stood at her front door waiting for my second uncle to return. A passing villager teased her about how wealthy her family must be, mentioning that her second son's family was stewing delicious fish. Furious at being tricked, she immediately rushed toward my second uncle's house, running into my drunken father along the way. When she told him that my second uncle had taken all 100 caddies of fish for himself, my father immediately sobered up in anger, and the two marched straight toward the second son's home. Smelling the soup from outside the courtyard, my father anxiously hammered on the door. Terrified, my second uncle opened it, but my father pushed him aside while my grandmother slapped him for being an ungrateful wretch who forgot his mother. They burst inside to find my second uncle's wife calmly drinking her soup. Unlike my mother, she was completely fearless because her family lived nearby, and her 3 elder brothers, the eldest being a production team leader, would fiercely defend her. When my father darkly demanded to know where the big fish were, she disdainfully pointed to 2 basins in the corner. My father frowned, seeing only a pile of tiny fish and frozen offal. My second uncle's wife mocked them, calling the prize a pile of stinky fish and rotten shrimp. My furious grandmother stomped her feet and called her a vixen, but the wife shot right back, bringing up the 30 yuan the old family still owed them, and threatening to call her brothers if my grandmother cursed her again. My second uncle desperately explained that only the top layer of the sack contained big fish, while the bottom was entirely offal. My grandmother refused to believe him, insisting she had checked the bags herself and blaming the wife for teaching him to lie. The room erupted into a massive, chaotic argument, with the greedy family members screaming at each other over the scraps. At that very moment, completely unaware of their misery, I was sitting comfortably at home. I was holding a bowl of hot fish soup and a steamed bun, happily praising my mother's excellent cooking. My mother smiled but asked if it was wrong of me to have paid off my grandmother with dog food. I grinned and replied that given how cruel they were, I didn't even want to give them the dog food. I noted that in these hard times, offal was still real food, and if they didn't want it, I would gladly take the scraps right back. With the wolves cleared out, the heavy shadow over the village finally dissipated. I spent the next 2 comfortable days focusing on my physical training and teaching my 2 little wolf cubs, Dakyong and Erkyong. The golden fox stayed lazy, eating and sleeping all day, though she was clean enough to always go outside to do her business. My mother was finally relaxed, often going down to the village to chat with the neighbors. I was just wiping down my new Mauser pistol, planning a trip into the mountain to test it, when my mother rushed in. She frantically explained that the production team's grain storage was under a massive rat infestation. These were no ordinary rats. They were red-furred, cat-sized beasts that completely ignored the village cats and even ate rat poison like candy. Recognizing the extreme danger of a ruined winter ration and a potential plague, I immediately put on my coat and grabbed my gun to check it out. As I walked toward the warehouse, I noticed the golden fox was silently tracking me from a distance. I called out and welcomed her to join the show, and she quickly caught up to walk right by my side. When we arrived at the grain warehouse, a panicked crowd was watching several young men swing shovels and pickaxes in vain at the fast-moving pests. The villagers were stunned to see me show up with the legendary fox. The golden fox casually strolled into the courtyard and suddenly leaped, biting a giant rat to death in one go. She tossed it aside to play with it, completely refusing to eat it. Seeing her power, I encouraged her to keep going. She dashed out like an arrow, utilizing intelligent herding tactics to corner and slaughter the giant rats effortlessly. Captain Lu Hai was overjoyed, joking that I had brought a deity to save next year's seeds. I asked him if the fox could earn some wages for her hard labor, and he immediately ordered a villager to fetch a chicken as an offering. Realizing the warehouse was too large to clear, in a single day, Lu Hai offered to record daily work points for me in exchange for the fox's continued hunting. I used the opportunity to negotiate a deal, promising to keep the fox working to eradicate the rat problem, if the brigade would officially arrange a lighter, comfortable job for my mother to keep her occupied. Lu Hai smiled and agreed to the trade. Captain Lu Hai agreed to my arrangement, and I was thrilled. I looked at the fox and promised her that if she cleared the rats, I would hunt pheasants for her. Over the last 2 days, I had nicknamed her Dodgy as a joke, but she seemed to accept it. Motivated by the promise of pheasants, Dodgy went into overdrive, killing rats efficiently without eating them. A villager brought her a slaughtered chicken as an offering, which she ate before resuming the hunt. By nightfall, the rat population was visibly decimated. I carried the exhausted fox home, where my mother had prepared a comfortable mat made of leather scraps and cloth. I told my mother the great news. Once the rat problem was fully resolved, the captain would allow her to join the workforce to earn points and stay occupied. Her face broke into a wide smile, expressing her happiness at feeling useful again and being together as a family. The next morning, I went for my routine training run while Deji slept. Afterward, I checked my mountain traps and successfully retrieved 2 large pheasants. Back home, Daji woke up and let out an incredibly enchanting, cackling laugh upon seeing the prey. I threw her 1 pheasant to eat and saved the second for the next day. Soon after, the man and the fox returned to the warehouse to finish the job. I used a sturdy new spear shaft provided by the production team to repair my weapon, transforming my short spear into a long spear. Utilizing my deeply ingrained military stabbing reflexes, I precisely pierced the fleeing rats. With our combined tactical coordination, we worked efficiently until evening without Daji overexerting herself. Meanwhile, Lu Hai and his team poured boiling water into the rat holes, sealing them permanently with stones, lime powder, and mud plaster. The great rat extermination battle concluded in a complete victory, and the brigade members thoroughly accepted me as one of their own. As I walked home under the bright moonlight, carrying Daji through the snow-covered forest, I looked down at her. I jokingly asked if she was truly a fox spirit capable of transforming into a human. She let out another enchanting cackle, sending a sudden shiver down my spine as I wondered if she really had become a spirit. I carried the fox home and carefully handed her to my mother, Lu Xiulan, who tucked her into her leather mat. My mother brought me hot meat soup and urged me to rest, but I told her I wanted to secure all our New Year's goods before the heavy snow locked down the mountain. This reminded her that the new year was fast approaching. As we spoke, I noticed she was being unusually enthusiastic and clearly hiding something. With a bright grin, she reminded me that I would turn 18 in 3 days. She revealed that second aunt had brought up a potential marriage with fourth uncle's daughter, who was exactly my age. I was completely stunned by the idea of getting a wife so early. My mother insisted it was the norm in the countryside and noted she could help raise the children while she was still strong. I tried to delay it, pointing out that our house was too small and our conditions were poor. I sweet-talked her, suggesting that with my hunting skills, I could marry an even better girl in 2 years once our lives improved. My coaxing worked perfectly, and she happily agreed that we should find someone truly special. Chatting with her by the oil lamp brought a deep warmth to my heart. In my previous life, my family was incredibly wealthy, but my father was a scoundrel, and my mother succumbed to depression. I had never felt true maternal warmth until now. As I lay in bed, I've watched her thin figure carefully mending my jacket under the kerosene lamp, and tears welled up in my eyes. I drifted into a deep sleep, dreaming of a gentle, loving mother tucking me in. When I woke up, I felt a fluffy presence beside me. It was the fox lazily rubbing her soft fur against my arm. As I played with her, a sudden rush of heavy footsteps echoed from the yard, followed by someone shouting frantically for me to come out because something big had just happened. I was startled when Captain Lu Hai rushed frantically into my room, sweating profusely despite the freezing weather outside. He breathlessly explained that a group of 6 newly arrived educated youth had taken the wrong path and wandered deep into the mountain by themselves. My expression turned grim as I analyzed the situation. I reminded the captain that the white wolf king I killed recently had likely been driven toward our village by an even fiercer predator or dangerous poachers hiding in the wilderness. If those helpless greenhorns crossed paths with whatever had terrorized the wolf pack, they would stand absolutely no chance of survival. Lu Hai panicked even more, urging me to grab my weapons so we could launch a search party. I quickly packed my Mauser pistol, a heavy supply of ammunition, my military knife, and my repaired long spear. Before I walked out, my mother carefully wrapped me in my grandfather's thick bearskin cloak, reminding me to be cautious. She also tied my water skin and a bag of dry food to my waist, ensuring I was fully prepared for a long trek. I hurried down to the team headquarters to join Lu Hai and the village militia squad. The militia members did not have firearms, carrying only basic tools like red-tasseled spears, broadswords, and steel forks. As I led the tense group along the narrow mountain paths, the men nervously gossiped about terrifying local legends. They spoke of a massive man-like creature called the human bear, which supposedly grew up to 4 meters tall and hunted down the mountain during the freezing winter months. Lu Hai eventually snapped at them, demanding they shut their mouths before their chattering attracted a real beast. I remained silent, focusing all my attention on observing the snowy landscape for clues. Utilizing my deeply ingrained Special Forces tracking skills and the detailed sheepskin map my grandfather gave me, I paused on a hillside to evaluate our location. I pointed out the exact path the youth must have taken from the opposite ridge. I deduced that since they had been wandering in the freezing cold for hours, they would inevitably seek a place to shelter. The only logical route that offered any cover led directly toward a region known as the Old Forest Land. The moment I mentioned our destination, Lu Hai slapped his thigh in pure horror. The faces of the militia members turned pale with absolute terror as they screamed that we could not enter that area, because the Old Forest Land was notorious tiger territory. The locals call the primeval forest the Old Forest. On my grandfather's map, this area is explicitly marked as tiger territory. The tigers here are Siberian tigers, the largest and most dangerous tigers in the world. Taking on a beast like that with only my compact Mauser pistol would be complete suicide. I touched my holster, my heart pounding as I calculated our odds. Captain Lu Hai noticed my grim expression and worried I might back out. I told him honestly that our weapons were inadequate to handle a tiger. However, I noted that tigers are migratory and change territories, so there was a chance the beast was no longer here. I asked him to make an immediate choice. Should we risk our lives to save the missing educated youth, or turn back? Lu Hai explained that the commune had entrusted these youth to us, so we could not simply abandon them. He suggested looking for clues first, and if we found nothing, we could turn back in good conscience. I agreed with his logic, and we led our small team down the ridge. The deeper we went into the valley, the tenser the atmosphere became. I suddenly stopped because the forest had become far too quiet. I pointed out to Lu Hai that even in the dead of winter, we should have encountered small game like rabbits by now. The complete absence of wildlife meant a massive apex predator had cleared the entire area. The militia members, having no real experience with deep mountain predators, immediately got cold feet. To resolve the situation, I suggested that the unarmed militia retreat to a safe area while Lu Hai and I proceed alone. With only the two of us, we could move faster and use our guns to scare off any threats. Lu Hai agreed and ordered the relieved militia to turn back immediately. With the crowd gone, our movements became much more flexible. We accelerated along the mountain path, reaching a dark, narrow valley by noon. Bending down to inspect the snow, I found fresh footprints. I picked up a handful of snow and dirt to analyze the scent before looking deeper into the trees. I turned to Lu Hai and confirmed that the missing youth had indeed headed straight into the old forest. I looked at the footprints leading deep into the woods and wondered why these educated youth had recklessly entered an unmarked path. I told Captain Lu Hai that their speed should be slow since they didn't know the way, so we needed to catch up immediately. Lu Hai readily agreed to follow my lead. He trusted me completely, knowing that my tiger fang necklace was a legendary token worn only by exceptionally capable hunters. I didn't know at the time that the necklace also emitted a distinct scent that could alert territory-bound predators, signaling a mutual threat to any apex beast nearby. As we tracked the group, I quickly identified areas where they had rested, noting from the discarded wrappers that they had already exhausted their dry rations. My tracking skills deeply impressed Lu Hai, though I secretly reflected that hunting was merely a side job compared to my past military tracking experience. Suddenly, I froze and focused my attention on a tree trunk. I pointed out massive fresh claw marks carved high up into the wood. Lu Hai carefully examined them, ruling out a bear or a leopard due to the specific width and height of the scratches. A cold sweat broke out on our foreheads as the same terrifying name crossed our minds, the Northeast Tiger. Realizing the extreme danger these helpless youth were in, we immediately picked up our pace. The further we went, the more a chilling aura of death seemed to permeate the forest. The snow now reached above our knees, making our trek exhausting. Lu Hai worriedly noted that 3 girls were among the group, including youths from the south who had never experienced a brutal northern winter. I commented on their reckless, adventurous spirit, using advanced vocabulary that surprised Lu Hai. When he questioned my high education level, I vaguely answered that I had attended junior high to hide my true background. Suddenly, I raised my hand and ordered Lu Hai to crouch down. My face turned completely serious as I locked my eyes onto a hillside just ahead. Perched upon a large stone was a massive silhouette. Lu Hai looked closely and felt a wave of tension, recognizing that it was not a human at all, but a formidable golden eagle. I stared up at the massive bird perched on the hillside. While Captain Lu Hai called it a golden eagle, I recognized it as a cinereous vulture. This scavenger species rarely ventures high into the mountains during winter, unless there is a fresh source of carrion nearby. Its presence, along with its massive 3-meter wingspan, signaled a dark and impending danger. I told Lu Hai to remain quiet so we could slip past without provoking it. As we moved cautiously through the trees, I spotted a dying deer collapsed in the snow. I examined its deep, savage puncture wounds and realized they were far too severe to be caused by a wolf or a leopard. I concluded that a massive Siberian tiger was actively hunting in the area. Fortunately, the deer had not been eaten yet, which meant the missing educated youth had not been targeted by the tiger. I urged Lu Hai to pick up the pace. Despite my thin, scrawny frame and history of malnutrition, My special forces stamina allowed me to glide across the deep snow faster than the captain could handle. Suddenly, I stopped at the sight of a fresh pool of blood staining the snow. I inspected it closely and confirmed it was human blood. Lu Hai panicked, fearing the youth had been attacked by the tiger, but I pointed out two distinct knife gashes carved into a nearby tree trunk. I realized they were dealing with something far more calculated than a wild beast: human criminals. We immediately launched into a frantic chase through the woods. Lu Hai struggled to keep up, tumbling into a snowdrift. As he scrambled back to his feet, he found me already crouched low behind a ridge, completely still. In the distance, three armed men holding knives and long spears were forcefully driving a group of captives forward. I whispered my tactical plan to the captain, telling him that I would flank the targets while he stayed back to watch for any hidden accomplices. Lu Hai was hesitant, worried about sending an 18-year-old to face desperate murderers. I looked at him calmly and asked if he wanted those innocent youth to die, or if he wanted me to eliminate the threat. My complete composure startled him. I explained that to me, these criminals were no different than the wild beasts I hunted, but I needed him to testify that I acted in self-defense. Lu Hai firmly agreed, declaring that my safety mattered more to him than anyone else's. Confident in my abilities, I prepared my weapons to launch a lethal ambush on the captors. I quickly moved through the pine trees and snow, completely vanishing like a ghost. I circled around to find the perfect ambush point. As I got closer, I saw the three captors clearly. They wore tattered animal skins and their faces were caked in mud. They consisted of one fat man and two thin ones. The tall, thin leader, Liang Sanjin, carried a Japanese Type 38 rifle. I pricked up my ears and heard them making vile, lecherous threats to eat the captives and assault the young girls. When a male educated youth bravely fought back, the short, thin criminal began viciously beating him on the ground. I knew time was running out. Their attention was entirely fixed on the beating, and the fat man had his back turned to me, perfectly blocking the leader. I chose my moment, suddenly stood up, and scattered the snow covering my cloak. Drawing on deep muscle memory, I assumed the precise Weaver shooting stance, extending one arm straight while bending the other to secure the Mauser pistol. I squeezed the trigger decisively. A loud bang echoed through the forest, and a crimson blood flower bloomed on the back of the fat man's head. He dropped dead instantly. My shot exposed my position. Liang Sanjin reacted with terrifying speed, firing his rifle toward me. I immediately hit the deck as the bullet grazed my scalp. Shocked that I had evaded his shot, the leader realized he was dealing with a military-grade expert. As he pulled his rifle bolt to chamber another round, the short, thin criminal grabbed a machete and charged wildly at me. When I stood up, the charging man was only a dozen steps away. Without a moment's hesitation, I raised my gun and fired two rapid shots directly into his torso. As his body staggered forward, I executed a seamless follow-up, firing a third shot cleanly into his head. Seeing my precise double tap and headshot execution, Liang Sanjin panicked. His hands fumbled with the cold rifle bolt. I smoothly shifted my stance, bending my knees and waist forward to engage the target using my body's natural point of aim. I squeezed the trigger repeatedly, emptying the magazine into his chest. Liang Sanjin cried out and collapsed into the snow. Keeping my muzzle trained on him, I moved forward cautiously and kicked his Type 38 rifle away. As he lay there gasping through bloody foam, he stared up at my childish face in absolute shock, unable to believe that the lethal marksman who had just eliminated his entire gang was merely a teenager. Captain Lu Hai rushed over, completely stunned by my precise shooting methods. Realizing my movements seemed far too professional for a teenager, I quickly threw my Mauser pistol onto the snow and forced myself to retch violently. I cried and sniffled, pretending to be utterly terrified by the killings. Lu Hai comforted me, relieved that my reaction finally matched my actual age. The rescued educated youth quickly gathered around us. Their leader, a fair-skinned girl named Zhao Xiaotian, thanked us and introduced her group. Lu Hai light-heartedly revealed his identity and introduced me as the mountain guard. I immediately cut the chatter short, warning everyone that a tiger was active nearby. Suddenly, a terrifying roar like muffled thunder echoed across the mountain, signaling a hungry tiger descending to hunt. Lu Hai panicked and shouted for everyone to run. Knowing his shouts would immediately give away our location, I made a quick tactical decision. Because one of the youth was injured, they could never outrun the beast as a group. Guided by my deeply ingrained military code never to abandon comrades, I ordered Lu Hai to lead the group away, while I acted as bait to lure the tiger in the opposite direction. I instructed him to light a smoke signal once they reached safety so I would know they were out of danger. Before he could argue, I dashed off into the woods like a rabbit. I stopped running when the massive tiger appeared less than 100 paces ahead of me. It had a deep, distinct scar across its face and stared at me playfully. I calmly raised my gun and fired a shot. The intelligent tiger quickly dodged, but its leap was exactly what I anticipated. The moment it jumped, I fired a precise follow-up shot, grazing its thick paw and leaving a bloody mark. Enraged by the pain, the tiger charged at me furiously. I zipped directly into the thick trees to confuse it. When the beast entered the woods, it paused, completely losing sight of me. As it cautiously circled around, trying to locate my position, I took aim from my hidden spot and fired a direct shot straight into its rear. The tiger let out a horrific roar of pain and embarrassment upon realizing there was an extra bloody hole drilled into its backside. I stood up from the snowdrift 40 meters away and immediately sprinted off. The tiger tried to give chase, but its hind leg was far too painful to handle the speed. It roared in absolute fury, shaking the snow off the surrounding trees, driven completely mad by the most cunning human it had ever encountered. They say you can't touch a tiger's butt, but I went deep twice and shot a permanent hole right into its backside. Leaving the hobbled beast behind, I sprinted along the narrow mountain path to catch up with the group. Captain Lu Hai was near the hillside preparing to light a smoke signal when I emerged from the trees. He rushed over and grabbed my shoulders, checking me over frantically while scolding me out of pure concern. I grinned and told him that since I put a bullet in the tiger's rear, it could no longer chase us. Lu Hai burst into proud laughter, amazed by my daring feat. He pinched my face to teach me a lesson about personal heroism, and I quickly promised never to pull such a reckless stunt again. He then happily promised to pull some strings with the commune militia to secure plenty of pistol ammunition for me. Lu Hai invited me to his house for braised pork and drinks, jokingly suggesting that I should marry one of the city girls we just rescued. I immediately shook my head, explaining that I was a wild mountain kid who couldn't adapt to city ways. Ultimately, all the lost educated youth were brought back safely. When we arrived at the village, the locals cheered for me, whispering that I must be a mountain god descending. My mother rushed through the crowd, checking me for injuries. When Lu Hai jokingly told her what I did, she gave me a gentle slap, scolding me for messing with a tiger. The villagers erupted into good-natured, vulgar teasing about the tiger's rear, which Lu Hai quickly shut down to respect the female comrades. One of the educated youth, Zhao Xiaotian, covered her mouth and giggled, finding the rural villagers incredibly pure and simple compared to the city. However, another male youth named Li Qing sneered at the vulgarity of the crowd. His companion, Zhang Ling, immediately shot him down, noting that working people are truly beautiful and that the banter simply showed their deep affection for me. I ignored their bickering entirely. My only goal was to serve the production team, so my mother and sister would be well respected. Lu Hai wrapped his arm around my shoulder, telling my mother that I would stay at his house tonight to sleep on his heated brick bed and attend a team meeting. My mother smiled warmly and agreed to let me go. During the general meeting that night, Captain Lu Hai only mentioned that I had injured the Northeast tiger. He completely hid the fact that I had killed the 3 robbers. None of the rescued educated youth raised any objections either. Once we were alone, I asked Lu Hai about his decision. He lowered his voice and explained that those desperate criminals deserved to die, and hiding the truth would protect me from a thorough investigation regarding my unusually precise, military-grade shooting skills. He advised me to keep my secrets buried deep inside my stomach and never tell a soul. He then asked if I had any ulterior motives, and I assured him I only wanted to live a good life and protect the village. Lu Hai then invited me to join a newly organized mountain patrol team tasked with preventing forest fires and occasionally assisting the Public Security Bureau. I was thrilled and asked if this would allow me to venture into the deep mountains. He smirked, revealing he knew I had hidden the dead robber's Japanese Type 38 rifle. He told me to retrieve it carefully and promised to secure the bullets, adding that he would help me get an official permit for it by spring. Furthermore, he tasked me with checking on a remote dower village, deep in the mountains once the spring snow melted, as the commune did not want to lose touch with their ethnic minority brothers. We arrived at Lu Hai's home, where his welcoming wife Xue Cuihua had prepared a fresh pot of stewed braised pork. I also met his 20-year-old son Flu Jianjun, who praised my skills and mentioned that a talented young dowerman from the village had almost become the mountain guardian before me. I asked if I had accidentally stolen the job, but Lu Hai shook his head sadly. Lu Jianjun explained that the young man had been the very first victim of the recent wolf pack. He had bravely stayed behind to cover everyone's retreat after a commune director named Wang gave blind, chaotic orders. The young man was eventually surrounded and torn apart by the wolves. When Lu Jianjun openly cursed Director Wang for the tragedy, Lu Hai immediately scolded him, warning him never to repeat such dangerous words to avoid bringing severe trouble upon our family. During our dinner, Captain Lu Hai explained that the chaotic security director, Director Wang, was a complete coward who ran away instead of handling the wolf threat properly. I listened intently, understanding the complex administrative layout of our vast and sparsely populated Qinglong ravine. Lu Hai practically managed all 80 households of Lujia village alone. As we drank strong white wine and ate braised pork, my throat burned. Lu Hai laughed and told me I needed to practice drinking because it was a vital skill to withstand the cold wind in the mountains. He then advised me that once the heavy snow sealed the mountain in a few days, I should transition to patrolling the village to deter year-end thieves. Furthermore, because I had graduated from junior high, he wanted me to help guide the newly arrived educated youth, jokingly calling me the top student of our village. Suddenly, a massive snowstorm began falling outside, reminding me that I needed to hurry up with my final hunting trips before winter fully locked us down. Just then, an urgent knock rattled the door. A villager named Lu Xiaowu burst in, frantically crying that his young daughter was twitching with a dangerously high fever and needed to go to the clinic at the foot of the mountain. Lu Hai worriedly noted that the 10-li journey down the treacherous mountain road in a blizzard would likely kill her. I insisted on checking her condition first, using my night-walking experience to offer help. We rushed over to Xiaowu's house and found the little girl convulsing pale in her mother's arms, while an old local doctor named Sun Langzhong helplessly shook his head. I touched her forehead and confirmed she was suffering from high fever convulsions. I immediately ordered them to strip off her clothes and prepare warm water to wipe down her body. Lu Hai recalled having paracetamol tablets at the brigade office and ran off to retrieve them. When the old doctor ignorantly protested, claiming that stripping the girl would freeze her and that she should instead sweat it out on the heated bed, I furiously yelled at the quack to shut up before he killed the child. Backed by my firm command, the panicked parents immediately followed my medical instructions. Backed by Captain Lu Hai's authority, everyone at Lu Xiaowu's house followed my directions. Xiaowu boiled water while his wife undressed the little girl and wiped her down. When Lu Hai returned with the paracetamol tablets, we dissolved them in water and poured it down her throat. Within 40 minutes, her body calmed and the fever subsided. Lu Hai was amazed, asking if I knew medical skills, but I lied and said I had simply learned the trick from a doctor. In reality, emergency field first aid was a mandatory skill from my special forces training. I told Lu Hai that while her fever had gone down, she still required antibiotics. He decided we should walk down the mountain to the clinic to fetch them ourselves rather than risking the child's life in the storm. As we braved the blizzard, Lu Hai jokingly noted that if I weren't my mother's son, he would suspect me of being a secret agent due to my handling of weapons and medical emergencies. I assured him I was entirely reliable, and he patted my shoulder, telling me to focus on staying home safely since the wars were over. We reached the foot of the mountain and entered the clinic. The doctor on duty turned out to be Dr. Zhang. He recognized me instantly and handed me a mug of hot water. When Lu Hai asked how we knew each other, Dr. Zhang explained that I used to bring my little sister Pang Qian to him whenever she fell ill, and that I had asked him to teach me how to treat common diseases to protect her. Relieved by the explanation, Lu Hai watched as Dr. Zhang provided us with a dose of early-stage penicillin, known colloquially as Big Oil. Our return journey up the mountain was brutal. The heavy, freezing snowflakes felt like small knives cutting into my face. By the time we stepped back into the village, the harsh wind had frostbitten my cheeks, causing the skin to crack and ooze blood. We administered the medicine to the little girl, and her condition immediately improved. Xiaowu thanked us profusely, and I bid him goodbye. Back at the captain's house, his wife Xue Cuihua anxiously applied lard to my frostbitten face and set me up to sleep on the warm brick bed. The next morning, after enjoying a hearty breakfast, I finally headed back toward my house. Along the way, the grateful villagers greeted me warmly. Just as I reached the mountain path, Zhao Xiaotian, the female-educated youth with the braided pigtails, came running after me. She explained that their injured comrade urgently needed nutrition and asked if I could sell them some meat. I was startled when the female-educated youth, Zhao Xiaotian, approached me to buy meat to nourish their injured comrade. To protect myself from potential gossip or legal trouble, I told her that all meat distribution had to go through official channels. I agreed to accompany her to see Captain Lu Hai. As we walked, she eagerly asked if I had really killed a wolf king. I replied modestly, noting that I was simply fulfilling my revolutionary duty to protect the village. While she praised my high awareness, I realized she had very high standards and was not my type. I was a realist, focused solely on daily survival. When we met Lu Hai outside his home, he understood the situation and took her to the team headquarters to put the meat sale to a vote, allowing me to finally return home. Back inside our cabin, my mother, Lu Xiulin, was busy processing wolf skins to make me a mattress. I told her the captain wanted me to officially join the mountain patrol team. She jokingly mentioned that second aunt's matchmaking attempt had already failed because the local girl's family looked down on us for being poor. I was secretly overjoyed but pretended to be annoyed. Before heading back out, I instructed my mother to only sell meat to the educated youth if the captain formally approved it, explaining the legal risks of private sales. She completely agreed with my caution. I packed a food bag, grabbed the fox Daji, and headed back into the mountains to recover the weapon I had hidden after the shootout. When we reached the slope, Daji initially tried to block my path, but she relented and followed once I explained that a large rifle would allow us to hunt much bigger prey. By afternoon, we reached the old forest land. I dug into the snow and successfully retrieved the Japanese Type 38 rifle. I then searched for the 3 robbers. Their bodies had already been scavenged by wild beasts, but I managed to bury the remains. The looting turned out to be an absolute jackpot. On the leader's body, I found a functioning pair of Japanese military binoculars. Even more shocking, he was carrying 2 standard Japanese cowhide bullet pouches, packed with over 100 rounds of live ammunition. I searched the other 2 criminals and discovered 3 more bullet pouches on the fat one, and a fully loaded Nambu Type 14 pistol, a Wangba box and hidden on the thin one. I buckled the gear onto myself, completely stunned by the massive haul, and feeling a wave of lingering fear at how heavily armed they had actually been. After analyzing the gear of the dead bandits, I concluded that the fat man was merely an ammunition carrier, while the skinny one possessed only basic shooting skills. The Nambu Type 14 pistol, or Wangba box, that I recovered had an enlarged trigger guard for winter use. Though prone to jamming, it was still functioning. I slung my newly acquired Japanese Type 38 carbine over my shoulder and packed away the bullets. On my way back, I spotted a massive male roe deer foraging 300 meters away. Since no one was around, I decided to test the rifle. I pulled the bolt, loaded a round, and silently closed the distance. At 300 meters, a pistol would be useless, but this rifle was perfect. I took aim, held my breath, and calculated the wind and terrain. I pulled the trigger, and the deer collapsed instantly. This accurate weapon would be invaluable for spring hunting. As I was tying the deer's legs, a rustling noise startled me. 2 lingering wolves suddenly leaped from the bushes to ambush me. Armed with my Mauser pistol, I fired 2 quick shots, sending both wolves to join their dead king. I dragged my heavy load of prey back toward the cabin. By the time I reached the gate, it was pitch black. My mother was standing outside holding an oil lamp waiting for me. Her presence warmed my heart. She helped me store the deer and wolves in our cellar before serving dinner to me and Daji. While eating, I asked if the educated youth had bought our meat. My mother confirmed they had paid 1 yuan through Captain Lu Hai, who handled the actual transaction. She noted that the captain praised my caution, as a private meat trade could get us into serious trouble. I mentioned my plan to hunt extensively over the next few days to secure more meat. I wanted to trade the surplus within the village for building materials and labor so we could construct a proper house with a heated brick bed by spring. My mother agreed that letting the captain organize the villagers would be the safest approach. Suddenly, Daji perked up and stared intently at the front door. I instantly went cold, sensing the shift in the air. I reached out, grabbed my gun off the table, and whispered to my startled mother that a thief was lurking right outside our house. I motioned to my mother to stay quiet and stepped out the door. The moment I opened it, Daji shot out into the dark. Her eyes glowed eerie green in the night as my shadow stretched across the snow. Near our cellar, I spotted 2 thieves squatting and attempting to steal my roe deer. I raised my gun and calmly stated that stealing was a bad habit. The 2 men froze in absolute terror as they stared down my dark muzzle. Daji seized the opening and bit one of them on the wrist, causing him to drop the heavy deer with a loud thud. I ordered them to drop any weapons and lie flat on the ground. Running from my rifle was impossible. Once they were securely tied up, my mother approached with the oil lamp. To her immense surprise, she recognized them as Quan Mazi and old uncle. She explained that by seniority, they were my uncle and great-uncle from my grandmother's side, though we rarely had contact with them. I insisted on taking them straight to Captain Lu Hai. My mother initially hesitated to avoid family embarrassment, but I reminded her that our safety was at stake if we let this slide. She relented and let me decide. When we arrived at Lu Hai's house, the captain kicked the thieves in a fit of rage, threatening to send them to the police station. The panicked men pleaded for mercy, claiming they only wanted some meat. Lu Hai declared they would face a mandatory public criticism meeting instead of jail, but warned them that any future offenses would lead to severe consequences. He turned to me for my input. I coldly warned the thieves that if they ever targeted my home again, my gun would not be so obedient. Lu Hai backed me up completely, stating that from now on, anyone caught stealing from the mountain guardian could be shot on sight without question. Lu Hai used this harsh punishment to make an example out of them. He knew my skills were highly valuable and that the state farm would gladly hire me if the village failed to protect my interests. By noon the next day, the captain held a general village meeting. He emphasized my indispensable role in defending the community from lethal beast attacks and established a strict rule. Anyone who dared to harm me would be permanently expelled from the village. This severe warning completely eliminated any lingering thoughts of theft among the locals. Meanwhile, I skipped the meeting to continue hunting deep in the mountains. While trekking through the thick snow, I suddenly stopped in my tracks. I stared in absolute shock at a small frozen corpse half buried in the winter drift. My heart sank as I whispered to myself, wondering how a child could have ended up dead out here in the wilderness. I looked at the corpse in shock. After a careful examination, I discovered signs of severe physical abuse. This was not a simple case of a child freezing to death. Someone had brutally tortured and murdered this little girl. The tracks at the scene led down the mountain, away from our village. I immediately turned back to find Captain Lu Hai. When I informed Lu Hai, He initially assumed her family had abandoned her because they could not afford to raise her. I firmly corrected him, explaining that she had been tortured to death. I told him that if he refused to handle it, I would report it to the police station myself. My words moved him, and he ordered the vice captain and a few militia members to help me retrieve the body before the wild beasts could get to it. Meanwhile, he called the authorities at the state farm. By dusk, Director Zhao Changhe from the police station arrived with a female officer named Xiao Liu. I described the scene and the clues in detail. My professional analysis deeply impressed the director. The officers debated whether the killer was a local villager or a bandit like Sui Sanjin. I pointed out that a child would have cried and caused a scene if dragged through a crowded village, so it was unlikely to happen completely covertly. I suggested a different theory. The little girl might have been bought from human traffickers. Director Zhao agreed that we needed to investigate thoroughly. He ordered Xiao Lu to check the neighboring villages for missing children. Then, he asked me to lead a search party deep into the mountain the following morning. Noting that I was a mountain guardian wandering the wilderness alone, he asked if I had a firearm. Lu Hai stepped in, explaining that I was a skilled hunter but lacked a proper gun. Director Zhao understood the reality of the situation. He instructed his officers to register me and issue an official firearm permit. However, he strictly warned me that I could only carry the gun during my official mountain patrols and never outside the designated area. I readily agreed to follow the regulations. When the director asked about my blind father who had kicked out such a talented son, Lu Hai simply mentioned my former family, leaving the officer completely stunned. Director Zhao Changhe was shocked to learn that I was the second son of the old Pang family. He scoffed at my abusive father, who had kicked out a talented son while keeping a useless favorite at home. Since Director Zhao was related to my second aunt, he treated me like family and assured me that my firearm registration would be approved, as long as I promised never to take the gun out of the mountains. Officer Xiao Liu also had a great impression of my sharp tracking skills and suggested to Director Zhao that I should be developed into an official local patrolman to assist the police. When they discussed searching the mountain to arrest the notorious bandit Sui Sanjin, Captain Lu Hai smiled and dropped a bombshell, revealing that I had already eliminated him. Realizing that keeping it hidden could cause legal trouble later if any rescued educated youth talked too much, I came clean to the officers. I admitted that I killed him and recovered a battered Japanese Type 38 rifle, which I kept at my house. I explained that I buried the 3 corpses near the old forest land, though wild beasts had already scavenged them. Director Zhao froze, but his response left us completely dumbfounded. He revealed that Sui Sanjin gang actually consisted of 7 members in total. My back was instantly covered in cold sweat. If we had only killed 3, the remaining 4 bandits were still at large and could easily target my mother and sister for revenge. Director Zhao asked if I dared to lead a search party into the back mountain at dawn to catch the rest of the gang. I agreed without a single moment of hesitation. I then hurried back home to protect my family, while Director Zhao promised to officially approve my patrolman status, which would provide me with a vital annual subsidy of around 100 yuan. After I left, Officer Xiao Lu asked who had taught me such extraordinary lethal marksmanship. Lu Hai covered for me, claiming he had trained me himself and boasting that I was simply a natural-born sharpshooter. However, the captain suddenly remembered a critical detail. He pointed out that my house had been burglarized by the 2 thieves just yesterday, right before the little girl's body was discovered today. He wondered if those shameless men were actually scouting my property for the bandits rather than merely craving meat. Director Zhao jumped to his feet, recognizing the extreme importance of the clue, and ordered Lu Hai to bring the 2 thieves in for questioning immediately. However, the messenger returned moments later with terrifying news. Quan Mazi and his father had already completely vanished from the village. Walking toward my mountain cabin, I felt a sharp, sudden killing intent emanating from the nearby woods. I directed a cold, steely glare into the thick bushes, causing the hidden ambushers to panic and duck low into the snow. Recognizing that these criminals were actively courting their own deaths, I sneered silently and hurried inside my home. The moment I stepped through the door, my worried mother began questioning my late return. I immediately cut her off, raising a finger for silence while gripping my Japanese Type 38 rifle. I ordered her to take my little sister Pang Qian down into the basement hideout immediately. Sensing the dangerous shift in my aura, she did not ask questions and moved quickly. I then instructed the fox, Dodgy, to follow them and protect my family before I securely closed and concealed the entrance. Slung with my rifle, I slipped silently into the dark night to circle around the threats. The bandits, thinking they were undetected, began surrounding my pitch-black courtyard. Led by a man they called Second Master, they sought revenge for their fallen comrade, Sanner. As their first man flipped over the fence toward a faintly lit window, I pulled my trigger. A crisp bang echoed as my bullet took him down, and the shell casing dropped onto the snow. Panicked by my unseen position, the leader ordered his men to burn my wooden house down. The moment a bandit produced a tinderbox to ignite the flame, I fired a second shot, executing a clean headshot. Desperate, the leader ordered another man to retrieve the tinderbox. I fired a third time, dropping him instantly. The remaining bandits realized in absolute horror that the deadly gunfire was not coming from inside the courtyard, but from right behind them. The leader ordered a tactical retreat into the yard, deducing that I was utilizing the ambient window light and the height of the tinderbox to pinpoint their heads. Once they scrambled behind the courtyard fence, the gunfire temporarily ceased. The leader leaned against the fence and sneered, confident he had figured me out. However, his warm breath created a tiny disturbance in the freezing air, exposing his position. I squeezed the trigger, piercing the fence and his skull in one shot. Terrified by the supernatural precision of my marksmanship, the remaining survivors broke cover and ran in separate directions to escape. I systematically tracked them through my rifle scope. I shot the first man down as he cleared the fence. I bypassed a second man running out into an open field, choosing instead to train my muzzle back on the fence line. As predicted, the next bandit peered out to check on his companions, and my bullet met his head instantly. Finally, I whipped the rifle back toward the open field and eliminated the last running target. I descended from my perch on the tree and walked into the corpse-strewn courtyard. Inspecting the dead leader, I found a Nambu Type 14 pistol and a pineapple grenade. I left the firearm behind to avoid suspicion but kept the grenade. I also searched his coat and pulled out a thick stack of great unity bills totaling about 100 yuan. As I pocketed the cash, a sudden rush of urgent footsteps echoed from the mountain path, followed by someone shouting frantically to check if I was all right. Director Zhao Changhe and Officer Liu hurried up the mountain with Captain Lu Hai after hearing the first gunshot. Following the trail of bodies to my courtyard, they were completely shocked by the clinical one-sided slaughter. Officer Liu confirmed that every single bandit had been eliminated with a flawless headshot. The precise angles revealed I had been lurking in a tree, using the house's window light to drive and target the enemies like wild beasts. While the officers marveled at my terrifying, seemingly supernatural marksmanship, Lu Hai reassured them that my background was entirely transparent, leaving Director Zhao to conclude that my skills were a product of pure, exceptional natural talent. When they called out to me, I stepped out from the gate, wearing my camouflaged leather and bear hide coat. I chose to be open and admitted that I fired the shots, explaining that the beasts were attempting to burn down my house with my mother and sister inside. I purposefully told Director Zhao to do with me as he saw fit, knowing he wouldn't arrest me for defending my family. Director Zhao laughed, confirming the bandits deserved to die, and noting the absurdity of their Nambu Type 14 pistol, losing completely to my Type 38 rifle without them firing a single shot. Lu Hai ruffled my hair, half-jokingly, questioning if I was the reincarnation of a killing god, and wondering how I would ever find a wife after killing 10 people. Director Zhao defended me, arguing that mountain guardians are frontline defenders who must shoot to protect their lineage. However, to ensure my safety, Director Zhao decided to commend my actions internally rather than making the story public. Both men agreed this would prevent me from being ostracized, though they worried the local villagers would still find out. I secretly didn't mind, believing that a relationship would only slow down my draw speed. Suddenly, Director Zhao turned to the female forensic examiner, Officer Liu, and asked if she had a partner. When she confirmed she was single, Director Zhao chuckled and looked at me, suggesting that since her profession made regular men hesitant to pursue her, her 3-year age advantage over me made us a perfectly matched golden couple.